Hey guys, I wanted to do this quick tip. People in lower ranks seem not to really understand why Uther is so contested in the competitive scene and in higher ranks. Why he's often a first ban priority in those competitive and higher rank areas. And one of the reasons why is not only do you get someone who works great with double support, which is very strong in the meta right now. But you also have someone who has a surprising amount of burst, and this is probably the one thing people don't realize on Uther, is how much burst he actually has. Especially if you're playing in the front line and you can safely get an attack or two off. You can sneak an attack or two, stun, and then throw all of your abilities onto one target. And if you're not main healing, if there's a double healer, you can throw almost all your abilities at the enemy hero and be rather safe with it. And it's a lot of burst potential. I mean, at 16, of course, you have Benediction. You can fire off 2 stuns. But even without the 2 stuns, in the early portions of the game, right as you get Holy Shock, you can walk up. You can auto, E, W, auto, Q. And that's 1200 damage. To look at a Janus health, that's about 40% of a Janus health without using anything but level 4 on. And so why that's so big is because if you ever catch Jaina at 40% health, you know you can kill her. But with your team near you, if you catch Jaina at even 50% health or 60% health, that could potentially lead to a kill as well. And that's as early as level 4. You catch Jaina at 60% health, stepping up to grab a wave, that's a kill? That's crazy. But on top of that, it gets crazier when you get things like your ult, which adds in an extra 319 damage with also a little bit more stuns that you can add more into it. So again, now you walk up, you're going to auto, E, W, Q, R, auto, auto, auto. Now we do 1800 damage. Well, again, a Jaina with 2600 health, that's 60 to 70% of a Jaina's health, and that's by yourself. Then you could also include the fact that you have a team with you, and your team can also add to that damage. Meaning that as early as level 10, you can lead to a kill on a Jaina with an ally near you at full health. And a tank at about half health. Then at level 16, we get that extra stun with Benediction. And it's the same thing. We're going to walk up. We're going to auto, stun, W, Q, stun, auto, ult, auto, auto, auto. And you can even sneak in one more Q. And that's nearly the full health of a Jaina at level 16. About 95% of Jaina's health at level 16. And if you just waited a couple more seconds, you can fire off a Holy Radiance to finish her off. You can 100-0 people with Uther. And he's one of the only people that has that type, but one of the only healers that has that type of burst potential. And the other reason why this burst potential is so much more valuable than a lot of others is because they're CC'd for a huge portion of that. So I'm going to get into a game really quick. I was playing on my Smurf, and my Smurf had decayed down to about D5. So I figured this would be a good time to maybe get this particular Smurf back up in rank. A couple of members of my team, I'm Diamond 4 at the moment, but a couple of members of my team were like, hey, we kind of want to mess around a little bit. Let's do Vikings. And once I saw the enemy tank was a Muradin, I realized that, let me turn off the, what is it, Control-Shift-C? Yeah. When I realized the enemy tank was a Muradin, I knew I could run Uther main tank. Why a Muradin? Well, Uther main tank doesn't have any mobility, and so if you're going to run Uther main tank, you generally want to run Uther main tank against tanks who can't move you. ETC can slide past you, and then you're going to be body blocked forever. Garrosh can throw you. Diablo can flip you. Mei can just icing past you and knock you towards the team. You don't want to go against any tank that can move you. Now, of course, he can move you post 10 with Haymaker, but most Muradins don't go Haymaker. So I figured perfectly fine to go with what I've got, and so I decided to run with main tank Uther. Again, it's another thing that I don't recommend too much to people in Storm League because there's a lot of things holding me back from picking it, and I feel like newer tank players and newer Uther players don't really know all the details of when to pick it and when not to pick it. But yeah, I do like main tank Uther a lot, even after the nerfs. I still think he's really good. So a lot of what I do this game is I'm going to be using my stuns to follow up stuns that my team's doing or to peel off of the enemies. But I always know that burst potential post level 4, and you're going to notice I use that burst potential a lot. There's several kills we probably shouldn't get that I end up getting because of Uther's burst potential. And I don't know of many other tanks that have this high of single target burst potential. I think, honestly, like if they... I would say like Varian does really high single target damage, and he's got a little bit more mobility. So if you want a more tank person that can do this, I would say Varian with like Overpower at 1 has the highest like damage potential as far as like a tank goes. Drafting follows a lot of the same rules for Varian. Varian has a lot more survivability than Uther, but Uther does have that extra healing. So right here, I stun him while he gets caught about 30% health, and then we have Thrall who ends up going for the root to follow up the stun, leads to a solid kill. And as you saw, it's post level 4, and well, I think we might have killed him a little bit before 4, but it was a tank at about half health. And so you're going to notice the targets that we pop are around those health ranges I talked about. Early game, Assassin's around 50% health, tanks about 30% health, and then mid-game is going to be tanks around 50% health, Assassins around 70%. Once you get Benediction, you can basically 100 to 0 Assassins as long as they don't have any self-healing. So you're going to notice there's a couple fights where like Greymane decides to jump in and just get blown up. And against an Uther main tank, you really never can safely jump in as Greymane without having that potential. So we're playing this as you normally play a Vikings comp, right? Vikings is going to cover top and mid, while we just endlessly push bottom lane and try to get as much value as possible. Our goal is to grab bottom lane and then swap lanes with top lane. However, this was a Storm League match, and the communication was not perfect, and a lot of people didn't follow very well. So it does get a little choppy during the mid game, but you guys probably won't experience too much of this just because most teams won't try to do anything crazy if they get a Vikings. So in that spot, I stunned a tad bit too early. You saw I stunned at about 80% health, and we dropped him down to about 20% health. So about 60% of his health while he was just stuck there. Part of the reason I did that was I just didn't think I would have another shot because he would have a jump target if I waited any longer. So we get an early Dragonite because, again, Vikings, we can leave 4 people down bot, and they can't contest us with 4 people without losing things. So right there, I do a lot of burst damage over to Greymane. But again, I use my stuns just a tad bit too early, something that I definitely need to work on if I want to start playing a lot more Uther main tank. I generally play Uther as a main healer, only because I like tanks that have a little bit more mobility. And I also like tanks that are a little bit faster to peeling. If something jumps too far past Uther, he takes too long to peel. So, just to talk about my build a little bit, this is the main tank build that I like going. I'll usually go Cleanse, but because we already had another Cleanse, I figured I would go Guardian. Armor of Faith's also okay as a main tank, but I take Q at 1, Q at 4. The whole purpose is that infinite mana that I talked about. You Q an enemy, it refunds 40 mana, it costs 40 mana and it refunds 45 mana. So you get 5 mana back every time that you Q an enemy, and you heal yourself. The cool part is it also keeps a really high uptime on your armor. So, I mean, a third of the game you should have armor. A little bit more if you're intertwining Holy Radiance to nearly like half the game. And then also I grabbed Guardian because they had a root on Mephisto, a root on Zul. And the stun I figured would go a little too slow for me, or be gone too fast for me to answer that. But I did it primarily for these two. I figured the only time we'd actually really lose a major fight is if we get hit by a really big Durance. And so me giving 50 armor to everyone that gets hit by the Durance effectively doubles our health. And that doubling of health and doubling of healing would be just enough to keep us alive through just about anything that they can do during Durance. So that's the reason I decided to go with Guardian of Ancient Kings, but all of the level 7 talents are definitely viable for main tank Uther. Level 10, I like to go Divine Storm unless I'm like running a hyper carry comp that I really need D-Shield. But again, that extra burst from Divine Storm is key. So this is kind of the downside about Uther a little bit. If I was Varian and he landed that root, I could have followed up with a taunt, led to a kill. But being who I am, as Uther with no mobility, there's only so much you can do, right? You have to basically run in. You have to be prepared to stun a target before they get hit by Thrall's root. And if you're prepared to stun, you're probably just going to stun. And so that's why it's usually easier for Thrall to follow up what you're doing. But I do my best to still try to follow up here and there. So I follow up his root with my stun, with my W, with my Q. And again, without ult, we did 50% of his health while he was stunned. And again, that's that Uther burst that there's just not... And I throw a Q at him just to stop him from recalling if he was going to continue recalling. But yeah, Uther burst it's pretty strong. I mean, it's just one of those things that people don't realize with Uther. Uther main tank's generally picked up because you want to run double heals or you want D-shield, but you don't want to give up your healing roll. And so that's usually the reason why people run Uther main tank, but he's actually just surprisingly bursty. Again, stun, Q, ult, a couple auto attacks in between, and we lead to another kill. Grab the globe from my team, throw some armor at us, and now we're up 2 kills and a fort, and we can basically go where we want to go. I told my team I think we should swap lanes to top, but again, it just takes us a long time to do that. I miss a lovely W right there. Hit absolutely no one. So again, you don't normally want to stun right away. You want to stun tanks at about half health if your team's helping you out, but you don't want to stun any earlier than that. If you stun earlier, then they just hop away at the end of the stuns. I also don't have my ult, so half health is a little bold. So in that particular case, I threw the armor out when he got rooted, but he actually got cleansed, so we didn't get the value from Guardian. But you're going to notice that I do follow up most roots with that 50 armor. So right here, I'm just doing my best to peel. I just want to see what the enemies do. And when I see what the enemies do, this is where I stun once. And again, this is about a 55% health Karazim. He was probably up to 60% before I threw out the E. E, ult, W, dead. And so I love Uther for peeling because, especially against dive-heavy teams, because of this burst. Now, the cool part about this is you don't need to play main tank to be able to do this, right? You're playing main heal Uther. What are we missing, right? I usually change my level 1 to Wave of Light, but I still take Holy Shock. I still take this talent, and this is up to you. I usually don't do it too much as main healer because I'm not going to be in the fray as often. But you can still take all of these talents as main healer. So Uther himself, and that's why this video is not like a main tank Uther guide. You can use this burst as a main healer or a main tank. Level 13, there's a lot of different directions you can go. 9 out of 10 times I take Blessed Champion. I didn't get a lot of value out of Blessed Champion this game. Normally I get more value, but they were a rather scary team. I probably would have gotten better use out of like Well Met. The reason that I don't like Well Met is if you've noticed, the targets I stun generally die. And if they die, I don't need to lower movement speed, and I don't need to lower their damage. So that's why I don't really like Well Met that much. So right here you see I give the 50 armor over to that target, and then I just do my best to get away. I save my W so I can give 50 armor to myself as I'm being attacked by this one. So we effectively didn't lose anyone because I don't think we lost. We might have lost Thrall, but I was able to keep the enemies distracted for a really good amount of time. Right here, again, I'm just doing what I can to annoy them without actually overcommitting anything. But yeah, I like this talent because when you do get an opportunity to attack stuff, this is like Lucio healing, pressing his E. It's a really high amount of healing. This, I just waste time. They already had control over this, so all I was really doing was wasting time here. But Get Angry Murden is definitely scarier than Uther. I'm not gonna die here, but and this is funny. I figured he would come down here and try to cut me off, so I went up this way. And I'm pretty sure that's exactly what happened because I saw the jump right there. But yeah, so that's the reason I like Blessed Champion. In between fights, it's really good healing. During fights, it's okay, but not great. Where well met, I generally kill the targets I stun, so I don't really get a lot of value out of this talent. And Spell Shield is kind of similar. I looked at the enemy team comp, and it's like, well, I can, but I mean, it probably isn't going to be that big of a deal knowing what team they have. Right there, if I would have followed up with a stun that, or followed up with his root, we would have led to a kill, but I was a little too slow. I don't go over the stun there because he would have just popped back away, and so we end up just backing up. Again, he gets 50 armor. That 50 armor allowed him to stay alive long enough for his ult to go off, and because of that, it allows us to counter engage as well. And that's why I love Guardian of Ancient Kings. I almost like it more than Cleanse, because giving someone 50 armor and then having them dump all their damage into someone who's taking half that damage basically just wastes a lot of their damage and abilities. Then I follow up, I stun, I throw out a W, we scare off Greymane, and everyone on my team is still alive. I should die here, and then I can heal up my team, keep them up, and Vikings will end up grabbing back the point. Again, we should be pushing top right now, doing the same thing that we did down in bottom lane until we can grab back the, until we can grab that top fort. Level 16, I always take Benediction as main tank and main healer. This talent's okay, but it's just not that great, and this talent's just not that great. Because if you're gonna die as Uther, you're probably stunned. Or you can always Benediction and throw an extra heal out, and you'll see me do that twice this game. I think there's 2 times that I do a double heal instead of a double stun. And once, I mean, we probably would have won without it, but one of the times was a major piece on why we won. Or just gave us an extra buffer, I guess you could say. So we have the punchy build, and so I go for a stun, but I don't ult there because he's still at 90% health. I move upward, and the reason I move upward here is because oftentimes Greymanes will throw a cocktail where the fountain is, and even though I did have a fountain, I figured it wasn't worth it to risk grabbing the fountain and then just getting hit by a cocktail. Like I have a fountain here, I throw out a W, and then I'm just kind of hanging out. I throw out a Q and I start auto attacking to get heals off of the Blessed. So you can see my health is just gonna kind of shoot back up. So in between fights, it's a great way to get topped back off. I pop Benediction here, get 1 stun initially, get another stun, I throw an ult out, and all I really did there was peeled for my team. I was stunning a full health target, so the odds of getting a kill were rather low. You can see even though I'm main tank, I do kind of move in and out of the fight. When I have abilities, I move forward. When I don't have abilities, I move back. 50 armor on the target that's getting focused, and once again, that 50 armor is going to be key on keeping that target alive throughout all of this. I then stun Greymane to counteract the enemies, and a great root comes out from, or giant slow comes out from Rhaegar. Throw out a W again, giving 50 armor, and that's it. So we only lost Vikings during that fight. Even though they had rooted Raynor and they had rooted Thrall, it didn't really matter. That 50 armor was too big. Now, the Vikings just rezzed all of the Vikings and is pushing top, and we didn't really lose much in the bottom lane. So overall, this has been an incredible fight for us. Very advantageous. We led to kills, and now we see I did end up stunning that Murden, but he was still able to get the jump off before the stun. I just gave a quick heal to 2 people, myself and one other, to give that 50 armor. And that's basically it. I mean, I'm spending most of this game just looking for picks with those high burst damage stuns. And I'm just trying to focus on healing targets that are CC'd. That way they get that 50 armor. So again, you see that stun, 50 armor, they can't fight back. I get hit here, I give myself 50 armor, and then I just walk away. I stunned this time, and my reasoning for it was he jumped in and I didn't want him to stun and kill me before I got any abilities off. So I immediately stunned when he jumped down so that he couldn't get that off, and then I healed and healed again to try to keep myself alive from the Greymane jumping in. When the Greymane gets closer, I try to go for a stun but end up dying, and I just go back to healing. There's pros and cons about having a tank that can do stuff after he dies. The pro about it is that the tank generally is going to eat the most damage for your team. So having an ability like that is perfectly fine. The con is that because Uther is the role that he is, he's just squishier than most tanks. He's just a lot easier to kill. And so that's one of the major downsides about playing Uther as main tank is, yes, you get benefits for dying, but you also just don't want to die because then your team doesn't have a tank for a little bit. But yeah, overall, you definitely need to take it with what you can get. I pop Benediction here, and I end up going for a stun, but again, slow Uther. And then I get the second stun, and I get my ult. That one, I did overlap stuns a little bit, but that's just because I was going to do the Benediction double stun and not do the ult, and then the other person got in range, so I did the ult. We ended up leading to 2 kills. It's okay to overlap stuns if you really have to, but I generally like to get the full duration of the stuns. You may need to practice it in like try mode a little bit. Level 20, anything's good, but I like to take Divine Hurricane. It makes the stun easier to land, and it also gives you a lower cooldown. I step away from the Zul because I don't want to give him an extra target to heal off of because my damage is burst, and so if I don't kill him in burst, I'm not going to kill him. Right here, you can see I give armor to both members of my team. I stun once, I stun twice, and he's fully healed up from his trait, or at least his E, and the extra heals that I gave him. So again, it's really risky to dive into a team that has an Uther, no matter the role that Uther is playing. Uther can also be ran in the solo lane, but you won't have very much wave clear at all. So I also tell my team that we're not ending here. I end up throwing the 50 armor onto Raynor, and Raynor survives through way more than he should survive. But yeah, I don't recommend him in the solo lane too often because there's not a lot of matchups he wins on like Braxis. There's a few. I mean, you can definitely go infinite mana with Q and last for quite a while. Right here, I go with the triple stun, and we lead to a quick kill at about a 60% health Muradin. But yeah, there's not a lot of matchups that he just like hard wins. There's a lot of matchups he can do okay into. And then on maps where you might need a double soak, he just does not have that capability to double soak. So if you're going to throw him in the solo lane, you definitely need a really good reason to do it. One of the teams that I was coaching a dorm team back when Heroes of the Dorm had like a full ride scholarship, and one of the comps that I was teaching them to play was Ana, Uther, Cho'Gall, and Phoenix. And it was cool because Phoenix or Uther could cover the solo lane depending on the matchup. Phoenix could cover the extra macro that was missing in the comp, and then we had Uther and Ana, which would both ult the Cho'Gall. So Cho'Gall would have Divine Shield and would have Nano Boost. Cho'Gall would pull everyone in, blow them all up, and then they would just go around and just stun people like crazy. And it worked really well. They were undefeated in that comp. The only time they started losing was when Cho'Gall or Uther was getting banned, and then they started losing. But for the most part, it was a fun comp that saw a lot of success. Right here, Muradin blind jumps in. Pretty risky, but I think he just thought we were already channeling the thing. I give 50 armor over to, or I attempt to give 50 armor over. This is where these fights get a little weird on Uther. If you start getting out of a fight and you're getting rather low because a lot of my like long healing is built into Blessed Champion. I need to attack things. So this is where you can really struggle as you get poked out of lane. But we do also have a Rhaegar, and so I'm okay. But yeah, I really liked that comp, and it did use Soul Lane Uther here and there. So now we just take this Dragonite head bot and we go right into this game. And I start healing myself off of my Qs and auto attacks. I didn't have an extra Q or anything to save that Rhaegar. I wasn't expecting him to get rooted right there. We go with the triple stun and take out that target, or I guess it was just double stun. And then I just start moving around. So whenever you're on a core, I always recommend you spread out around the core. The reasoning for it is because if people want to kill you, they have to kind of chase you around the core. And AoEs will never hit everyone on your team because you're all going to be spread out. So I start spreading out this direction. I throw a Q onto Greymane, and I'm just attacking the core to get light healing. I end up getting hit by a light stun here. Then I throw out a W. I stun him. I throw out a Q on myself this time because if you notice last time my auto attacks were healing for 67, that's because I only got half the heal from my Q, which means the Blessed Champion only healed half as much. So now I Q'd myself this time so that my auto attack would heal for more. And then I basically just kited around the Greymane. I didn't want to take too much splash damage from this, so I only took one proc. I spread out, and then I used a Benediction here to then throw a W at myself so I can start tanking now that the Dragonite's gone. And then I threw a second W so I could stay higher health, stunned Murden, and we finished the game. So, Benediction, it works great for a lot of different reasons, but I just really wanted to show the burst potential of Uther. There are a lot of things some heroes do that are just very underrated, and this is one of them that everyone knows Uther main tank for what he brings, and Uther healer for what he brings, but what people don't realize is that you're not going to draft him as an assassin, but he has burst assassin damage as Uther. So if you have a comp that you need to add some damage in the support role, I think you guys should look at Uther a little bit. Yes, there are like supports that do more damage, but I mean, even with Karazim, he does more sustained damage, and he only did 10,000 more than me, and that really wasn't that big of an issue for me. And then I would probably more compare myself to like the tank, which, I mean, Murden's probably one of the highest damage tanks in the game, but I kind of was able to bring what Murden brought and also the same healing that their main healer brought, and I wasn't even the main healer. So there's a lot of cool things that Uther brings to the table, but the biggest thing that I want you guys to realize when you're playing Uther in the main tank role or the main healer role, that you have a lot of burst potential. You just need to make sure to burst people when they're lower health, then burst. If you burst people when they're high health, you won't have anything left and they'll walk away. So try to burst people when they're lower health. Most of the kills that I led to this game were on targets who thought that they could get away, and then they got just completely stun locked until they died. And that's because I only stun locked them when I realized I could take them out. And that is the burst from Uther. Thank you guys so much for watching, and feel free to check out my other videos.